But we're super excited about today. Today is a topic that so many people are interested in learning about at Stanford Graduate School of Business, entrepreneurship. There's many different facets to this and so many different valuable resources here at the GSB. So today we are especially delighted. We have some special guest stars. So we have Deb Whitman, who is here, who will be leading today's call. She is the director of a very important center here. We call it CES, it's the Center for Entrepreneurial Studies. So Deb will be leading this presentation today as well. And she is joined by her colleague, Lauren, who is here also supporting, Lauren Notariani. So the two of them, we're just gonna hand it over. I'm sure we're also recording this webinar in case you want to reference it afterwards as well. So Deb, Lauren, take it away. We're so thankful to have you here.
Hey, welcome. Really excited to be here with all of you today. And I'll tell you what we're planning to do with our time and shout if there's something else you need from us that we're not planning to cover. But I thought I would take you through at a pretty high level some of the resources that we have at the business school when you're here as a student that help you learn about entrepreneurship as part of your broader leadership and management learning experience here at the GSB. Please feel free to ask questions as we go. Raise your hand, unmute, sort of, just jump in and ask questions. And I'll also try to pause every once in a while and ask questions as well. And then we'll have time at the end for even more questions and answers. I see we're being recorded on somebody's agent. Yes, this is good. I tell you what, if you wouldn't mind, pop into the chat where you're calling in from. I'm just curious where everybody's coming from, quite literally. And if you are willing, I see a few of you have actually turned on your screens. To the extent we can make this a conversation, I will be grateful. Hopefully you'll get even more out of it. So feel free to come on screen and be part of the room if you're willing and able to, and I understand if you're not. So Mumbai and Miami I've seen so far. London, okay, we're in Seattle, San Francisco, great, you're close by. We're in the Bay Area, by the way. Vancouver, Sao Paulo, wow. We are all over the planet, you guys. This is fabulous. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen so that you can see the slides we wanted to talk about today. And so first of all, welcome. We're excited to have you joining us. I know some of the folks who have joined us today are here because you want to learn about the GSB and decide if the MSx program is something that might be a good fit for you. And others of you have already applied and been admitted. And to those of you, I say congratulations. I think you have a really wonderful choice ahead of you to decide if this is going to be the right thing for you. And I hope that this is a useful conversation for both those of you who are considering applying and those of you who've already been admitted. So I guess the first thing I would say is when you come to the GSB, one of the things you'll find is that you end up being immersed in an environment that's really supportive of learning about entrepreneurship. So about 2/3 of the students who arrive at the GSB in any given year tell us that entrepreneurship is an important part of what they want to learn as part of their management and leadership learning experience. At the time they graduate, about a third of our MBA class, and we don't always get the numbers exactly on our MSx class, but a decent portion of our MSxers as well are actively doing something entrepreneurial at the time that they graduate. And going forward into our alums, we have a lot of entrepreneurial activity among our alumni. About 37% of our MSx alums have founded at least one company after they graduate from the GSB. And a remarkable percentage of those people have founded more than one company after they've finished their MSx program. So whether it's the students that'll be in the classroom with you, or it's the alumni who often are coming back into the classroom as mentors, as case protagonists, even as course lecturers, you're going to find there's a lot of entrepreneurial engagement at the business school community. So if that's something you're interested in having be part of your master's program, this is a good place to do that. I've already mentioned that a lot of your classmates will be very interested in this. Oh, look at me, I'm ahead of myself. And This is an example of one of our MSx alums, Madhu Shetty, who founded a company called Balmair. It's a skin cancer product for a product for skin cancer patients who are going through radiation, which can have some really difficult challenges for skin health. So you'll find a lot of the alums from both the MSx and MBA programs are doing something entrepreneurial. Here's another example of one of our really, really interesting MSx alums. This is Ritu Narayan. Ritu founded a company called Zoom. It sort of started as, think of it as Uber for students in school, right? Getting your kids to and from school. That didn't work, and she took a big pivot. And so now she's running transportation services for school districts that shorten the amount of time it takes for kids to get to and from school. So instead of one giant school bus that's going all over the school district, they're running smaller vehicles that are getting kids to and from school more cost effectively, better for the environment, and in a shorter, more efficient way for the families. And then all those buses are powered by solar power. And so she's got a whole ecopreneurship aspect to this business as well. We teach entrepreneurship at the business school, and we recognize that not all of our alums necessarily found companies with what they learn about entrepreneurship. So we sometimes say that what you learn about entrepreneurship here, you can end up taking it out into the world in a lot of different ways. We call it 5 lenses on entrepreneurship. We do, in fact, have lots of people found companies. This is another MSx founder, Itziar Diaz-Canedo. She and her sister actually founded a company called ViaWork. But you can also join an existing startup. This is one of our MSx alums who joined a company called Peak Energy and joined as their VP of Biz Dev and Finance. There's a third way a number of our folks take an entrepreneurial journey after the MSx program, and that is entrepreneurship through acquisition. They raise some money to spend a year or often 2 years searching for a company to acquire, raise some equity, often take debt as well, to acquire that company, and then grow that company at a faster rate than it was being grown by its prior owners. So this is a way to get into entrepreneurship and company leadership without necessarily having like the next great idea for what the new product or service is that you'd be creating if you were founding a company. We also have people who bring their entrepreneurial skills into play through impact or climate innovation. This is Joseph Cow, an MSx student from just the class of 2024. He has co-founded a company called Magnify that identifies weak points in the electric distribution system and allows for that for the maintenance of the electrical system to be done ahead of time to avoid wildfires and to reduce brownouts, if you will. And so a service for the electrical systems companies, but also a safety and environmental benefit to all of those of us who have lived in a place where wildfires can be sometimes sparked by what's happening in our electrical grid. And then finally, we have alums who take their entrepreneurial learning and put it into action inside large corporations, whether they're launching new products or updating important innovating with respect to processes within the company. We have people bringing those skills into place in large corporations. Here's an example of one of our MBA students who's the global chief of innovation at E&Y. So a lot of ways you can take what you learn about entrepreneurship and bring it to life in your career beyond your master's program. I'm actually just going to pause there for a second and see if there's any questions before I move forward. Okay, I'll keep going then, and you shout if you've got some. One of the areas that we bring some focus to with respect to entrepreneurship is entrepreneurship related to challenges of climate change and sustainability. And there's a fairly new program, it's only about 3 years old here at Stanford, called the Ecopreneurship Program. And this program brings together an understanding of what are the big and potentially now becoming to be solvable problems that face us with respect to climate change and with respect to sustainability more broadly. Brings that together with the tools that we teach about entrepreneurship, how to evaluate an entrepreneurial idea to see if it has, if it's of an idea that's viable enough that you should be investing your career and potentially somebody else's money to invest in it. And so if this is an area that interests you, there's this whole program that operates as almost a joint venture, if you will, between the Stanford Graduate School of Business and the Stanford School of Sustainability. So we have all of the folks with the scientific background in the School of Sustainability and the folks with all the business background in the business school, which makes this a really rich program for entrepreneurship in this space. We also have some focus on entrepreneurship in the world of social impact, right? People trying to solve problems that affect other human beings in the world in a way that brings social good to the world. And so even when I think about, well, anyway, so that's an area of focus as well. And then we have lots of students that work on just regular startup ventures, right? A new software solution that's going to make the way you manage accounting processes in your regular business more effective. But there are lots of different ways lots of different industries you can bring your entrepreneurial learning into while you're at the JSB. So I want to talk for a little bit about some of the different ways, some of the different learning resources that you have available to you while you're here at the business school. The first and most obvious one will be your courses. So at the business school itself, we have about 50 courses right now that are embedded in the concepts of entrepreneurship and innovation. And so you have a lot of classes you can choose from, and depending on what your own learning needs are, you'll be able to sort of meet some of those learning needs with courses that have an entrepreneurial aspect to them in very many cases. We kind of break them into different groups. There are enough of them. So just as an example, we have a set of courses called experiential courses. These are courses where you actually bring a startup idea into the classroom and you spend the quarter evaluating that startup idea to see have you really identified some burning unmet customer need? Have you really identified a solution that's going to solve the customer's problem? Do you have a value proposition here? Are you able to do it at a price point that's going to make sense to the customer? Do you have a go-to-market strategy that makes sense? So really evaluating a startup idea to see if it's something that makes sense to move forward with or not. We also have a whole set of functional courses. So let's say you show up and you say, hey, I have a great finance background, but I need to learn about marketing, and I'm really interested in entrepreneurship. Well, we have a course, for example, called Customer Acquisition for Early Ventures, for new ventures. You can get some of that marketing learning that's focused on marketing issues that affect early stage companies. Or on the flip side, you show up and you've got lots of marketing background, but you need finance learning. You could take a course like Finance and Accounting for Entrepreneurs, for example. So a series of functional courses, whether that's in finance or marketing or organizational behavior or strategy, that are entrepreneurially focused. We also have a series of entrepreneurial courses that are industry focused. So if you want to learn about innovations and disruptions in the education space, in the transportation space, certainly in a lot of different parts of the technology space, in healthcare, we have specific courses that look at entrepreneurial issues and opportunities in some of these specific industries. We also have a set of courses that we call our Startup Fundamentals courses. So you might hear people around the business school talk about a course called Formation of New Ventures. That's kind of our, we don't call it a core course, but it's one of our foundational entrepreneurial courses. And then we have courses that focus on social innovation, social impact kind of new venture ideas, and ecopreneurship, climate and sustainability kinds of venture ideas. So a lot of different classes. You get to curate the curriculum that's a good fit for you, kind of filling in the things that you want to be learning about with respect to entrepreneurship. This is an example of one of the approaches we take in one of those experiential courses I mentioned. It's a course called Startup Garage. We teach it here at the business school. There are about 12 different experiential entrepreneurial courses taught across the Stanford campus. The Startup Garage one is the largest one taught at the business school. And Startup Garage takes you through this process of first really understanding whether there's some unmet customer need in the space that you're trying to evaluate. We had a team several years ago, for example, who started with the hypothesis, we want to figure out whether we can do something innovative that will make it safer to bicycle in cities. And so they started by interviewing a whole bunch of people bicycling. They actually went out to a bike trail here in the Bay Area that literally hundreds of people are biking on every weekend. And they interviewed over 100 people over the course of a weekend and asked them questions about how they perceived their safety when biking in cities. So they gathered all this customer information and they developed a point of view about what was the biggest challenge that people were facing with respect to feeling safe when bicycling in cities. And then they used that point of view to ideate a whole bunch of solutions. And one of the solutions they settled on, the point of view they realized was that the cars get too close to the bicycles. The bicyclists feel least safe when the cars become too close to them in the city. And so they ideated a bunch of solutions, and one of the solutions they decided to prototype and test was a device that would let cars know when they get too close. So it used some sort of sensors to let you know when cars came too close, and it emitted a noise, sort of basically saying to the car, hey, like back off, you're too close, dude. And so then they began to test this prototype that they developed. Interestingly, one of the things they learned is that when cars and bikes are in close proximity, the addition of a loud noise does in fact get the attention of the driver, but it also startles both the driver and the bicyclist. And they actually were creating situations where people were like, it actually wasn't helpful. It sort of made people more nervous, not better, not less nervous. And so they then got to go back. You can see there's sort of these swirly things here. They then got to go back after that test and rework their prototype and come up with a new set of things they wanted to test. They ideated and tested a whole new set of things that actually had to do with local ordinances about how close bicycles were allowed to be to cars, and some of the things that they could change in the roadways that could allow bicycles to have more space to be safer from cars. So totally different kind of solution. And by going through and ideating and prototyping their ideas and testing them, they were able to refine to something that was able to be more useful in the real world. So that's an example of some of the things you would learn going through a class like Startup Garage. As I mentioned, there are lots of different experiential entrepreneurial courses. A course like Startup Garage is pretty project agnostic. So I mentioned biking safety. We have teams in Startup Garage working on better solutions for certain kinds of software incorporations. We have solutions in that class that resulted in a company called DoorDash that does delivery of restaurant food to people's homes. You can have any sort of idea in that class. But there are other classes that are quite project specific. So a class like Hacking for Climate and Sustainability, that class is obviously only going to have projects in it that are focused on climate and sustainability, as is Stanford Climate Ventures. There's another class called Hacking for Defense that looks at solutions in the world of defense for countries. And then a course called Biodesign Innovation, which, as its name probably implies, looks at innovations with respect to medical devices and biodesign kinds of solutions. So you have a lot of classes to choose from in this world of experiential learning for entrepreneurship.
Sorry to interrupt you, Deb. We have a great question in the chat that asks, is Startup Garage a multi-quarter course? How many quarters does a student invest to go through this process? And MSx only has 4 quarters. How and when do teams make a formation?
That is indeed an excellent question. So Startup Garage is offered for 2 quarters and they build on one another. So Startup Garage 1 is taught in the fall and is also taught in the spring. So as an MSx student, you can take it in the fall when you kind of right soon after you arrive, or you can take it in the spring. Startup Garage 2 builds on Startup Garage 1. In fact, Startup Garage 1 basically takes you through this testing of the product piece. And then Startup Garage 2 moves into testing your business model. It starts to look at what's your go-to-market strategy, what are your unit economics, etc. And Startup Garage 2 is taught only in the winter. So if you want to take the sequence of Startup Garage 1 and Startup Garage 2, then you're going to want to take Startup Garage 1 in the fall, and that'll mean you'll need to put together an application during this short summer session that you would be here as an MSx student. We do have a number of MSxers who do this Startup Garage 1 in the fall, Startup Garage 2 in the winter. We also are starting to see Startup Garage 1 happening in the spring is new. Last year was the first time we taught it. And so we did see some MSx students just take Startup Garage 1 in the spring as an alternative. So you have two options for when you start the Startup Garage cycle. You're not required to take Startup Garage 2 if you take Startup Garage 1. You can take the fall class and then not continue. Maybe you've already figured out by the time you get to this point that you haven't really got a solution that you think is worth continuing to investigate. Then you'd either stop and not take Startup Garage 2, or you might join somebody else's project and work on their project to learn the skills that we teach in Startup Garage 2.
And we had one more question specifically about the Stanford Impact Fund. What's the process to get into that as an investor? And is it meant for-profit investors?
So I will tell you, the Stanford Impact Fund is a program operated by a sister organization to the Center for Entrepreneurial Studies. That group is called the Center for Social Impact, CSI. And I will admit, I do not know the answer to your question about the Impact Fund. So I would encourage you, I will ask if Bonnie or Catherine know, but if you don't, I'd encourage you to reach out to our colleagues at the Center for Social Innovation.
I admit I do not know the answer to this question either. So, but we'll put a link to that section of our website for the Center of Social Innovation.
Great. Perfect. Any other questions? Okay. The last thing I just wanted to share with you about our entrepreneurial courses is that nearly all of our entrepreneurship classes are co-taught between a tenure-line faculty member and lecturers who typically are business leaders. Either they've been entrepreneurs themselves and built really interesting, impactful businesses, or they're investors who have had the opportunity to look across and be involved with a large number of different businesses. And so that brings to you this beautiful combination of the academic focus on learning about entrepreneurship and the kind of real world, how does it actually work day to day in the business world focus as well. And so that combo is quite powerful. In this situation here, this is the Startup Garage teaching team. Stefanos Zenios is our professor who's in charge of all of the Center for Entrepreneurial Studies and is the sort of godfather, if you will, of the Startup Garage class. And the faculty sitting here are all entrepreneurs and investors who are lecturers who co-teach that Startup Garage class. So, as is Dawn over here as well. So that whole group of folks are co-teaching the Startup Garage class. All right. I will, the other thing I just wanted to kind of remind you is we do have these 50 classes that are very focused on entrepreneurship, but it's also worth remembering that all the classes you take during this sort of summer core session, as well as the electives that you take that are not technically entrepreneurial electives, they all end up building your knowledge about how you might want to run a company if you end up starting a company after the GSB. Entrepreneurship when you're first starting it looks maybe a little different than the rest of what we teach at the business school. But by the time you get that company up and running, everything you're learning in all your strategy classes, your marketing classes, your accounting classes even, are going to be really potentially very impactful in how you run that business. So just wanted to give a reminder about the broader aspect of the curriculum and how important that is for your entrepreneurial learning as well. All right, I am definitely going to pause here because that's the last thing I wanted to say about classes. I'm going to move on to a couple of other resources that will be useful in learning about entrepreneurship while you're here. Any other questions about classes, though, before we move on?
Looks like we had one more question in the chat. Is there a course that combines venture capital investing with a hands-on startup garage or venture studio experience?
No, but there is a great course on venture capital investing taught by a professor named Ilya Strebulev, which I would highly encourage you to think about taking if you are interested. And there is a course, there are two sections of a course called Entrepreneurship and Venture Capital that actually bring together both the perspective of a venture capitalist who might be investing in a company and the perspective of the entrepreneurs who may be looking to raise venture capital and then partner with and work with their investors over time. So that course, Entrepreneurship and Venture Capital, one section taught by Peter Wendell, one section taught by Peter Ziebelman, both that does bring you sort of into that intersection of the perspective of the entrepreneur and the perspective of the VC. And then Ilya's class really is an excellent class on the perspective of venture capital investing. So a bunch of alternatives there, maybe not anything that's quite what you described, but things that'll get you to that intersection.
And then we had another question. I'm an entrepreneur looking to scale my company from Series A. Is the MSx program a fit for this?
So if you are ready to raise Series A, I might humbly suggest to you that trying to do a year's master's program while you're trying to scale to Series A might not be what I personally would recommend. So being a student at a place like this, the business school, is more than a full-time job if you intend to both be present in the class and like help build the learning experience for your cohort, and if you intend to get everything you can out of this experience, which includes all of the learning opportunities you have, but also interacting with your classmates and building your network that can be very useful for your career and your business going forward. Like if you're going to do the GSB the right way to get the most out of it for yourself, it's more than a full-time job. And I'm sure if you're at the point of raising Series A capital, you must already be super clear that running a company at that stage is also way more than a full-time job. I don't think being a student here gives you the bandwidth to be raising Series A funding in real time as a student is my perspective on it. I'd focus on raising my Series A and running my business if I were at that point.
We have a few more questions in the chat. One person asked, can they jump straight into the second part of the Startup Garage course if they're joining another person's project? Which I said, yes. If you join a team that has already taken the first quarter, you can attend the second quarter. And someone said they didn't follow along how that works. Basically, it is a two-part course taken in both quarters. And the first quarter builds on what you learn in the second quarter. So different information in that. One of the other questions we had is, what type of support might Stanford offer in terms of grants and funding for tested ideas and ventures during and after the startup programs?
So Stanford, generally, our mission is to be an amazing educational institution. We're not a company that makes investments, or we're not an organization that makes investments or grants into startup ideas. There's a whole industry that does that. We can help you through the GSB network find the folks who do those kinds of grants and investments, but the business school is not the entity that's going to typically do those things. There is one place where that is possible, and that is there's a center at the university called the Tomcat Center, and they make small grants, sort of up to $50,000, for projects that are very focused on climate and sustainability sorts of solutions. And so, there's like an edge case, that's a specific edge case I know about, but generally speaking, we will send you to the market to find the grants and the funding for the ideas that you're looking to build. We're going to provide education because that's what we do as an institution.
Right, one more question. Is there a course that specializes in intrapreneur, internal startup for MSx?
It's not an MSx specific course, but there is a course, and Lauren, you maybe can help me here after I say it wrong. You can maybe look up the exact name, but it's called something about disruptions, and it is focused on intrapreneurship, sort of innovation and entrepreneurship within an existing organization, sort of creating disruptions to move your organization into new spaces or to solve problems in new and differentiated ways. And this is, of course, taught by Charles O'Reilly. And I apologize that I don't have the exact name for you, but if you look at our course listings, and I put a link to the course listings on one of the prior pages about courses, if you just look for the word disruptions, you'll find it. But yeah, that's an entrepreneurship focused class. The most open to MSxers for sure, but not MSx specific.
And then,
What
since
else?
there's a lot of resources available pertaining to entrepreneurship these days, could you please list the top 3 things that you think make Stanford's program learning a unique experience?
I think I've said them, but I'll tell you them again in the short version. I honestly think the biggest thing is that you are immersed in an environment that is filled with a lot of other people who are interested in entrepreneurship, both on campus, where you'll find classmates who are really interested in it, our alumni who come back and bring their experience and interest in it. And frankly, we're, 2 miles, not even, maybe a mile and a half from Sand Hill Road and everything that's happening sort of in that Silicon Valley venture capital environment. And a lot of folks from that environment are coming into the classroom as well. So it's just an entrepreneurship that's pretty steeped in entrepreneurship. I've had students say to me, I came here with no intention of doing anything entrepreneurial, but it's a little bit like in the water you're drinking. So I've now decided this is something I may choose to do. Sort of piqued my interest. That's the first thing. Secondly, we really do have a very usefully curated set of learning experiences, both in the classroom, which we've talked about so far, but also things that can augment learning beyond the classroom that we, over the course of 30 years, have kind of put together. And then the third piece of it is, I just think you get to learn from a really amazing set of teachers, both from the academic background side and from the world of business and investing. To me, that's a big part of the secret sauce of this place. I was a student here myself pretty long time ago now, but the quality of the people you get to learn from is a big piece of it. So those are the 3 things I would say. Okay, I'm going to do a quick couple of things about opportunities to learn or extend your entrepreneurial learning beyond the classroom. The first thing is we have a program called the Stanford Venture Studio. If you kind of look at it on the surface, you might think, that looks a little bit like a startup incubator. It has expert advisors that we bring in who can meet with you one-on-one to talk about the startup idea that you might be evaluating or thinking about, whether that's in a class like Startup Garage or if it's something you're just working on or noodling about on the side. We have workshops that we offer several times during the quarter to help teach you about things like what are the go-to-market strategies for consumer-focused startups? What are some of the go-to-market strategies for business-focused startups? What are some of the legal issues about getting a company up and running? So a number of workshops that are available. We have an online community with more than 2,000 people who've been through the Venture Studio over its last 10 years of existence. And people post questions there all the time and get some very thoughtful responses from our alums who were part of Venture Studio when they were here as students. We also have software available to you to help you build prototypes when you're testing your ideas for new product ideas. And then we have co-working space, 24/7 co-working space. So if you know much about startup incubators, it kind of sounds like an incubator, doesn't it? But it's not. We are a university. We are not in the business of incubating companies. We are in the business of trying to incubate really smart entrepreneurs, people who've learned how to evaluate a startup idea and understand whether it's worthy of investing some number of years of your careers. Because let's face it, your opportunity costs are big. If you choose to go do a startup, that means you're not working at some other place that could have a whole bunch of different really great outcomes. And so we want you to leave this place feeling like you're better positioned to make good decisions about when you want to invest the time of your career into doing something entrepreneurial. And that's what we try to incubate, if you will, in the Stanford Venture Studio. This is a team in the Venture Studio that was working on a new solution that uses magnetic connections rather than mechanical connections for bicycle pedals. The idea being in a sort of emergency crashy situation, you're going to pop out of those things and be less likely to injure your legs if you have a fall on your bicycle. Another resource we have available for you when you're here on campus is the Team Formation Hub. This is a place that it's an online resource where you can go and post, hey, we're a group of 2 MSx students who are looking at a solution related to whatever it is you want to be checking out, you know, better ways to reduce emissions from, I don't know, some heating solution or something. And we're looking for somebody with this kind of background. And then other people will post, hey, I don't have a great venture idea, but I have these skills. I'd like to join people who are looking at a new venture idea in the consumer space or in the business space or whatever. So it helps you connect to other folks all across campus, not just at the business school. I do want to call out a quick thing for international students. One of the things you have to be a little thoughtful about when you're here, if you're actually evaluating a startup idea, even in a class like Startup Garage or through something like the Venture Studio, you want to be a little careful about the activities that you're going to be doing so that they couldn't be misconstrued as being work, because you're not able to work on a student visa without having some sort of a work authorization like an OPT. And so if you come here, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but I just want to make sure that those of you who are joining us from places outside the US, like just have this on your radar, and we'll talk through it when you get here. You just need to be thoughtful about what you're doing and when you need to get that work permit sort of activated if you're really moving forward with your startup idea while you're here. We also have one program that is a post-graduation learning experience. I mentioned Joseph Cow before, who started this company that is solving the problem of maintenance issues in power grids. And Joseph joined our post-graduation program for a year after he finished his MSx degree. He spent a year working on an idea that preceded his current company, Magnify. This idea was called Circubat, and it was a project that focused on reusing partially depleted auto batteries to provide battery power for industry situations. And he ended up not moving forward with that idea, but he spent a year with some stipend-based funding that allowed him to work on that startup idea for the first year out of his MSx program. This is a very tiny program, I want to be clear. We have 5 fellows every year. That's out of, 400 and some MBA students who are graduating and, 80 some MSx students who are graduating, as well as it's open to students at the School of Sustainability. So it's a tiny program, but it's a really exciting program for students who are working on sustainability-focused venture ideas at the time they graduate. Another post-graduation learning opportunity is that, again, very tiny program. Each year we have 2 to 3 people that we hire coming out of our MBA or MSx programs to spend a year with us in the Center for Entrepreneurial Studies as case writers. And so Kim Latipov is one of our MSx grads, and Kim spent a year with us as a case writer, writing cases about really interesting startup companies. Zipline is an example of a company that's doing delivery through drones. They started by delivering medical and medical products in, I believe it was Rwanda, and now are looking to move their business as well into more established economies. And so Kim got to do some really interesting cases. You interview the CEOs, you interact with these sort of entrepreneurial leaders to write cases that then get taught in our classes. So an interesting opportunity post-graduation. And then there are student clubs and other things that you can join. There's just a lot of opportunity to be learning about entrepreneurship while you're here. And I'm going to stop there and pause and ask if there are any other things you all want to talk about.
I'm going to go through the chat a little bit because we had a few questions. Someone asked, what are dedicated resources for VCs for MSx students, apart from the courses you mentioned? One being the VC Club that was just on the screen, but please feel free to take it away, Deb.
Yeah, I think the VC Club and the classes are by far the most important resources. We also have a short session where we can teach you, our librarians actually teach you how to use a resource called PitchBook. And they teach you the skills of how to utilize PitchBook to go in and identify which venture capital firms are investing in things that are similar to the thing you're evaluating. And it even can help point you to GSB alums who are in those firms. So we have some skills we can teach you about how to identify VCs who might be a good fit for what you're thinking about working on.
And then we had another question. Someone is looking for a program or course that focuses on the intersection of finance, brand, storytelling, and fashion. Do you know of anything that sort of intersects all of those?
I do not. Yeah, that is not, I don't know that we have anything at that particular intersection. That's a very interesting intersection of things. And I think you would have to do individual, like finance would be easy for us to help with. Fashion, you could bring that into any of the, into many of the experiential courses, but we don't have any courses that focus on fashion necessarily, although I've definitely seen projects focused on fashion come through Startup Garage, for example. What else?
Someone just asked, are there common pathways MSx students use to work with cross-campus institutes like Stanford HAI, especially when developing research-driven or venture-backed ideas?
So there are some more typical, more institutionalized pathways for working between the business school and the School of Engineering and between the School of Sustainability. With HAI specifically, I don't think there are any official sort of institutionalized programs that link business school students to HAI. I think it's something you would have to do more proactively, going and interacting with the folks in that institute and potentially taking some courses taught by the people who are operating that institute. There are some places where there's more sort of established pathways. I think this would be more one where you'd be forging your own pathway more.
It looks like we have a hand raised. Ruben.
I joined a little late, but I was wondering, especially for the MSx program, for the people that are trying to be entrepreneurs, what have you seen to be more common? Someone that comes in already with an idea in mind and they use the 1 year to really expedite that idea, or is it earlier stage where they're using it to kind of explore their venture and 1 year is enough kind of time to really solidify that?
So I've seen both is the truth. Um, I think a lot of people show up with sort of an idea in their heads. And I've had alumni who have founded companies say to me, I found it really useful that I had my startup idea sort of in mind. I wasn't doing anything with it yet, but I sort of had something in mind. Because even when I went through the early core courses in the summer, I was starting to think about like, well, how would what we're learning about strategy here, how would I apply that to this idea? Or how would what I'm learning about finance, like what implications might that have for this idea I've been sort of playing with? Um, in my opinion, the best way to use this year is if you're interested in doing something entrepreneurial, is to bring an idea in and spend the time evaluating that idea. I think if you're actively trying to start the company while you're a student, it's a little bit of what I said before. It's it's a big more than full-time job to really get a startup company up and running. And if you're going to take somebody else's money while you're still a student, that gets really tricky because they expect you to be more than full-time focused on this venture idea. So to me, using this year to really evaluate your startup idea and figure out, does this thing have legs? Is it worthy of getting somebody else's investment into it? Is it worthy of being what I spend the next 5, 7, 10 years of my career on, given all my great opportunity costs? Using the year to do that, from my perspective, is sort of the ideal way to approach it if you can. I mean, everybody shows up with different realities, though, of course, right?
Thank you.
Someone mentioned a class, perhaps at the School of Engineering, where you validate 10 or 100 business ideas over the duration of the class. Do you happen to know the name of that course?
I have never heard of that. That's very interesting. That is a new one to me. Is Ilya's course similar to his book on venture mindset? I think venture mindset has been drawn very much from what he teaches in his course, but also from some of the research that he's done around unicorns. And if you don't follow him on LinkedIn, Ilya posts some really interesting results from his research on unicorn companies on LinkedIn. I'd encourage you to consider following him. But yeah, his venture mindset book, I think, is drawn at least to a reasonable extent from some of what he teaches in the course and his perspectives that he's honed through the course over many years. Bonnie, I see you're tackling some of the questions I wouldn't know how to answer. That's great. Thank you.
Exactly. Teamwork.
Ooh, there's a question there about mandatory standardized tests that I do not know the answer to as well. I'll leave that to you, Bonnie.
Yeah. Yes, we've been answering admissions style questions, including standardized tests, requirements of the program. So hopefully we're keeping up with your questions as well.
Yeah. I saw the question about collaborations between the GSB and the law school. There are a couple of answers to that. One is there is a startup clinic at the law school that often our students have been able to access and get some legal guidance from their startup clinic. We do have students who participate in sort of a hackathon pop-up that happens at the law school once a year. And we definitely have students that go take classes at the law school. For example, there's an IP class that sometimes some of our entrepreneurial students will go take at the law school. I would say in general, though, if you're trying to interact with students at the law school, you may have to be a little bit proactive in going and taking courses there or participating in things there. It's not, those pathways are narrow, not wide. So you may need to do some of your own forging there.
Also, if you join the Venture Studio, we have Sam McClure often participate and send through opportunities, and he's a name that you'll hear a lot if you're doing anything at the School of Law.
Yeah. Lawyer at the School of Law who's very involved with entrepreneurship and very helpful to our entrepreneurial students. All right, I'm going to suggest this. You've all been very attentive, and I'm grateful. I'm going to let those of you who have gotten the information you need head out and have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. And thanks for joining us from all the many places you came from. If you still have questions, please feel free to stay on the line. Lauren and I and Bonnie and Catherine will stay on the line for a little bit and answer more questions. But if you've gotten what you need, I hope this was helpful to you, and good luck with making whatever decisions you need to make about your master's program. And we hope you'll give us a shout if you have more questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Deb and Lauren. Incredibly helpful. And thank you for everyone who has attended. So yes, we will be recording this session and posting it on our YouTube channel shortly.